Maybe your child isn't bad at reading, they simply haven't been given the right keys to the code yet. Today, we're going to stop guessing what to do and share how to start building a real foundation for your child, brick by brick. Let's face it, are you exhausted from the reading battles and that late night worry about your child's future? I've been in those trenches, and I want you to know you aren't powerless. You can help them. In this episode, I'm pulling back the curtain on a typical 1-hour OG session to show you exactly how we rewire the brain for reading success. I'll explain the Orton Gillingham Methodology so you can use it to help your child. So go grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. Well, hello everyone. My name is Tracy Young, OG tutor extraordinaire, founder of theliteracykeys.com, and most importantly, mom of a dyslexic daughter. Welcome to my podcast, where you'll discover ways to unlock your child's reading potential. I'll share tips, strategies, and war stories that have happened along the way, because everyone deserves to be able to read. So let's get started. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Literacy Keys. I'm Tracy Young, a certified Orton Gillingham tutor, and I'm really glad you're here. Today, we're going to be pulling back the curtain on the Orton Gillingham Methodology. Now, you've probably heard the term, but I really wanted to share all the elements that are involved. I'm going to go through a 1-hour session, section by section, so that you can understand the Orton Gillingham approach and maybe even try a mini lesson at home. The bottom line is that it's never too late to help your child become a better reader, and you're more powerful than you realize. So let me start by explaining that the Orton Gillingham methodology is educational therapy. It's not a program and it's not a curriculum. It's a systematic, cumulative, and multisensory approach to teaching. What it does is it creates a foundation, brick by brick. Now, a typical session is approximately an hour in length. The session is divided into mini lessons that move fast enough to keep an ADHD brain engaged, but slow enough to ensure mastery is achieved over time. Now, even if your child doesn't have ADHD, the sessions or the design of the session keep a child's focus and prevent frustration from setting in. Because when frustration occurs, learning stops. So using the Orton Gillingham methodology to develop a session means that it's going to have somewhere between 8 to 10 different topics. The Orton Gillingham approach is designed to teach English language by integrating oral language, reading, writing, and spelling. It goes far beyond simple reading. The Orton Gillingham methodology focuses on the how and the why so that students go beyond memorization. Because let's face it, there is only so much that you can memorize. And I do have to admit, I'm enough of a geek that I love delving into the why. Because understanding the why is a lot of times how you remember it. I'll discuss each area and explain why it's important. But first, I want to take a few moments and talk about Scarborough's rope in order to help explain the Orton Gillingham methodology. Now, you can Google Scarborough's rope in order to see the picture, but it's basically a framework that's used to explain the complex process that goes into reading, because reading is rocket science. The image is a picture of a rope made up of different strands, and they're grouped into two sections. Now, one section focuses on word recognition, which we call decoding, while the other focuses on language comprehension. And that includes vocabulary, background knowledge, grammar, and so forth. There are approximately 8 strands in total, and a strong reader needs to develop all 8 sections. I like to think that using the Orton Gillingham methodology allows you to integrate these 8 sections into every lesson plan. So let's dive in and talk about the first one. When you have a session, first area is called language development. And each section is about 5 minutes long. The language development section helps create a bridge between oral language and written language. Right? We all see how babies begin to talk, their oral language, right? So, for example, I might talk about idioms in this section. Why? Because a student needs to understand that an idiom is an expression that has a meaning beyond the literal words that are presented. And we use them all the time to express something, but if a student doesn't understand the idiom, then they're going to be clueless about what someone is trying to convey. So, for example, let me get specific. If a student hears the idiom, when pigs fly, the meaning could be lost on them if they don't understand that the expression means it will not happen. There are so many things that adults take for granted that children need to be taught. And the language development section allows you to discuss orally what these things are so that they become familiar with it. After we finish this, we go on to alphabet. Now, this isn't just about the ABCs. It's also about spatial awareness and the logic of our language system. Yes, we do have the student go through and recite the alphabet, but they are not allowed to sing it because too often children don't know the order of the letters without singing the entire alphabet song. So, through continuous repetition and different practices, we disconnect the letters and the order of the letters from the song. This is also the section where we introduce dictionary skills and thesaurus skills. A student learns how to identify synonyms, antonyms, and how to select an appropriate word. Once we finish the alphabet, then we're on to the next session, which is a visual drill. And here we're reviewing the card deck. And this can take between 5 to 10 minutes, depending upon the student. Now we have 2 separate decks that we drill. Why? We are building automaticity. Mastery requires repetition. And we want the brain to see a letter and fire off the sound without having to think about the sound, right? Because if they have to spend all their brain power decoding the sound of the letter B, they have no energy left to understand the sentence or the word. So this section, the student first identifies the letter that are presented on these cards, and they go through really quickly. And we only introduce letters that have already been taught. Then we move on to the second deck, which includes keywords and the sound. Student goes through, identifies the keyword and the sound that again have already been taught. So it's just a quick building automaticity through repetition. From here, we go to the fourth section. Now, this is more of an auditory drill. And here, what we're doing is laying the foundation for spelling. So we review what's called the spelling deck. And again, it could take between 5 to 10 minutes depending on the student. This is a different set of cards from the previous one, and they're even a different color. Most of them tend to be green, whereas the other deck, they're white. Now, I like to think of it's the flip side of the previous deck because by focusing on the sounds, the student is then required to identify how to spell those sounds. Now, this practice helps solidify the sound letter relationship. So I might start off by saying the sound k, and then the student needs to write down all the ways that they know how to spell it. So, for example, the student may write K, comma, C, and then they also incorporate based on the position. Well, what happens when I hear the K in the final position at the end of a word? Then they may write down digraph CK, the letter K, the letter C, the letter KE, all depending upon the conditions that are present in the word. And what this does is this connects the ear to the hand. It's one thing to recognize a letter when you're reading, and it's another thing entirely to retrieve it from memory for spelling. And this drill is done every single session because the repetition is truly the friend of the dyslexic brain. From here, we go to the next section. And this section is new learning. I like to think of this as kind of the aha moment. And it's not me just teaching. What it is, it's engaging the student to discover elements. So I'm not just pushing out all the information. By engaging them, I'm pulling them in so that they can discover patterns. Because when they discover the pattern, it sticks rather than having me just push the information out. We introduce one and only one new concept at a time. Maybe it's a new suffix, or it's a rule about syllable division. The new concept is introduced during a discovery learning, right? That pulling that student in so that they can see and discover the pattern, right? What this does is it engages the student with the learning and they own the discovery. The message that is always underscored is that the student isn't bad at reading. They simply haven't been taught those elements. They haven't been given the key to the code yet. From this section, then we go into practice. So, for example, the sixth section is practicing reading. We practice lessons that have already been learned. In one session, the student might work on a word list. Another session might focus on sentences. The essential part of the practice is that the words are controlled. That means that the student has learned the concept or the rule. They are not asked to read words that they cannot decode. And the reason for this is that we want to provide wins, not foster frustration. And if they haven't been taught something, I don't expect them to be able to read it. Now, when I have a list of words or sentences, I like to ask my students to pick a number, say between 1 and 10. I circle the number that they've selected, and those are the items that we work on. If I know I'm not going to have enough time because I need to go through all the different topics, I don't need them to read 10 sentences. I can get them to read 3 sentences. I demonstrate it, and then they feel engaged because they're the ones selecting the sentences. I have one student who's always like, well, let me see before I pick. And so what I do, it becomes a game with us. I show him my list and then I move it so that he can't read and pick and kind of predetermine which sentences he wants to read. And he knows I'm going to do that, right, while he's picking the numbers. So it kind of becomes our game for it. And by picking the numbers, it seems like such a little gesture, but it provides the student with an element of control over their learning, right? They are the ones that determine the items to work on. So once they've practiced the reading, then we go into the handwriting section. And let's face it, in a society that uses mostly thumbs to type on their phone, this segment might seem a little anachronistic or ridiculous. But in fact, there's a purpose, there's a reason why we incorporate it. Handwriting is an important part of the lesson. We teach cursive writing because the formation of letters occurs in one direction from left to right. There's much less lifting of the writing instrument off of the paper. And for our kids with dysgraphia or executive functioning challenges, then the physical act of writing can be a bottleneck that we need to remove. So we work on handwriting so the hand knows how to move basically without thinking because it becomes automatic. And this allows the brain to focus on spelling of words, on writing the information rather than the letter formation. The next section that we go into is spelling and dictation. This section focuses on the rules of spelling, but is different from the drill that I talked about before because we're actually practicing the spelling of words according to rules that they have already learned. So, for example, as I talked about earlier, when they just identified the possible ways of spelling the final sound k in a word, now there are specifics. We may start up with words, some of which end in CK, others which end in K. And over time, as they learn more lessons, then we may add in more words. So now they have to differentiate between words that end in CK, words that end in K, or words that end in C. And there are rules. We might use a grid, right? So the student has to explain out loud the rule that is being used before they actually spell the word correctly. At other times, I may dictate a word, use it in a sentence before asking the student to spell the word. The medium that we use to spell the word varies. It may be paper one day, a chalkboard another day, a whiteboard another day, and even a scratchy towel on the fourth session. The concept of this section is to ensure that a student can hear the sounds, that they remember the rules, that they control their hands, and they write the word correctly. That's a lot. And that's why we build up to it. From here, right, then the next section that I want to cover is review. Now, the lesson itself ends with a recap of the new discovery that we had earlier in the session. But what I love to do is to turn this around and ask the student to play teacher and explain the new learning to me. Now, this helps me check for understanding and keep them focused because when they're explaining it, they've got to be focused enough to be able to explain it to me. Right? I want them walking away feeling like an athlete who has just finished a workout, not a kid who's just failed a test. So these are the different subsections or sections that go into an overall 1 hour session. And I wanted to give you a general sense of what the Orton Gillingham methodology looks like. So think the overall session is made up of mini sessions, but they're all interlinked. And depending if I need to spend more time in one area, then I will, because that's what's essential. If it's not an individual lesson, it's more like a marathon. And I can't just brush over something and assume that they are going to learn it. I have to teach it, they have to absorb it, we have to practice it and practice it, right? All of those elements work together to build that foundation, and each section builds upon the other. So, the ultimate goal, let's face it, is independence, and each child has a unique path. And what I love about the Orton Gillingham methodology is that allows me to ensure that it's diagnostic. So I can see the area that one student is struggling in, then we need to spend more time and practice on that area. So each lesson is individualized to that student. So, like I said at the beginning, think about taking and incorporating a couple of these elements when you're sitting there at the kitchen table trying to help your child. So, if you're feeling overwhelmed or want to see if one-to-one educational therapy is right for your family, head over to the Literacy Keys and contact me. Also, keep an eye out. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be introducing and talking about my 6-week summer spelling challenge, right? That might be right for your child. Well, that's all I have for this episode. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next week. Bye now. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to the Literacy Keys podcast. Follow us on social media, and most importantly, tell a friend. See you next week.